In 1977, a film opened on 32 screens across America that almost nobody in Hollywood believed in. The director was hospitalized making it. The first cut was a disaster. The studio had given away the sequel rights and the entire merchandise deal without a second thought. By the end of summer, it had changed everything. 1. Fox gave away the rights that built a $6 billion empire. When George Lucas sat down to negotiate his deal with 20th Century Fox, he made a choice that Fox considered generous on their part. He agreed to accept a reduced directing fee of $150,000, well below what he could have demanded after the success of American Graffiti. In exchange, he asked for two things: full rights over any sequels to Star Wars, and ownership of all Star Wars merchandise: toys, books, clothes, games, everything. Fox agreed without hesitation. Merchandise rights for films were worth almost nothing in 1976. Nobody had ever monetized them at scale. The studio considered it a minor concession on a film they weren't even sure would make its money back. Since 1977, that merchandise deal alone has generated over $6 billion for Lucas, making him the wealthiest filmmaker in history. The sequel rights funded an entire second empire. Fox had the biggest film of the decade in their hands and gave away the part that mattered most. 2. The first cut was called a complete disaster. When editor John Jimson delivered his first cut of Star Wars in late 1976, George Lucas watched it and described it as a complete disaster. Jimson had been working in an impossible position. Lucas had never properly explained the film's story or tone to him. The cut was technically correct. Scenes played out in full, master shots flowed into coverage. But the energy was dead. It was slow, flat, and lifeless. According to those present, it bore only partial resemblance to what the finished film would become. Lucas fired Jimson and brought in editors Paul Hirsch and Richard Chew. He also asked his then-wife Marcia Lucas, who was simultaneously cutting Martin Scorsese's New York, New York, to take over the editing. Her response to her husband after seeing the rough cut was direct. "Yes, it's a mess, but there's a great film in there. It can be saved." She and the team rebuilt the film's structure from the inside out, removing scenes, tightening sequences, and letting the cuts drive the energy rather than the actors. The version of Star Wars that audiences saw was substantially different from the footage Jimson had been given. 3. Harrison Ford was only there to fix a door. George Lucas did not want Harrison Ford as Han Solo. Ford had already appeared in American Graffiti, and Lucas had a clear preference for new, unfamiliar faces. So he hired Ford as a carpenter, specifically to hang a door at the casting office during the Star Wars auditions. Casting director Fred Roos, who was a Ford admirer, had engineered the situation deliberately. He knew Lucas would be on the premises and arranged for Ford to be working there at the exact moment auditions were running. Lucas needed actors to read lines during the sessions. Ford was available. He stepped in to read Han Solo's dialogue opposite the people actually auditioning for the part.
Well, anything's better than just hanging around waiting for him to pick us up.
Everyone in the room agreed he was doing it better than anyone who had come in to audition. He was cast. The list of actors who lost the role of Han Solo to a man who was there to hang a door includes Al Pacino, Jack Nicholson, Robert De Niro, Burt Reynolds, Sylvester Stallone, Christopher Walken, Bill Murray, and John Travolta. 4. Tunisia experienced its first rainstorm in 50 years on day 1. Principal photography on Star Wars began in Tunisia on March 22, 1976. The desert landscape doubled for the planet Tatooine. Tunisia was chosen specifically for its harsh, arid terrain, a location that had barely seen rain in living memory. On the first day of filming, Tunisia experienced its first major rainstorm in 50 years. Production halted immediately. Sets that had been built in the open desert were damaged. Equipment failed. The schedule collapsed before a single usable frame had been captured. R2-D2's remote-controlled mechanisms broke down repeatedly throughout the shoot, causing further delays. The studio was already concerned about the budget. Lucas was already behind, and he hadn't even left the first location yet. He was so dispirited by the end of the Tunisia shoot that he couldn't attend the wrap party. He told people he hadn't got what he needed and was deeply depressed about it. 5. ILM had spent half the budget and finished one shot. Industrial Light and Magic, the effects company Lucas founded specifically to make Star Wars, was assembled from scratch in a warehouse in Van Nuys, California. The team was made up of young artists, engineers, and film school graduates who were essentially inventing new techniques as they went. By the midpoint of the production schedule, ILM had spent half of their entire budget. They had completed one of the 360 special effects shots the film required. Fox executives were in crisis. The studio board was applying pressure to pull the plug entirely. Lucas was hospitalized with hypertension and exhaustion. Stress had brought him to the point of clinical crisis. He was told to reduce his workload immediately. That was not an option he was willing to take. The team eventually solved their problems. But for a period in the middle of production, the most important visual effects company in modern cinema history had almost nothing to show for the money it had burned. 6. The opening crawl was written by Brian De Palma. The opening crawl of Star Wars, the scrolling yellow text that opens every film in the saga, is one of the most recognized images in cinema history. It was not written by George Lucas. Lucas had written the crawl himself, 6 full paragraphs of dense exposition explaining the universe, its history, and the conflict the audience was about to enter. He showed it to his friend Brian De Palma, who told him plainly that it was incomprehensible and went on forever. De Palma rewrote it. He stripped 6 paragraphs down to 4 clear sentences. Lucas accepted the rewrite. What audiences read at the start of every Star Wars film is the work of the director of Carrie and Scarface, not the man who created the universe it introduces. Fox had also initially opposed the crawl entirely, suggesting a narrator instead. De Palma's involvement helped convince them to keep it. 7. Chewbacca was inspired by Lucas's dog. The visual concept for Chewbacca, a large, fur-covered co-pilot with a loyal, emotionally expressive personality, did not come from science fiction literature or production design meetings. It came from Lucas's dog, a large Alaskan Malamute named Indiana. Indiana would ride in the passenger seat of Lucas's car and had a physical presence and personality that Lucas found immediately cinematic. The dog's name was later borrowed for another Lucas creation, Indiana Jones. Mayhew himself was cast after standing up to greet Lucas during their first meeting. Lucas looked up at the 7'3" actor, turned to producer Gary Kurtz, and said he thought they had found him. 8. Darth Vader's voice was an afterthought paid $7,500. David Prowse was cast as Darth Vader because of his physical size and presence. He filmed every scene in the suit, delivered every line on set, and fully inhabited the character's movements. Then Lucas listened back to the footage with Prowse's West Country English accent coming out of the helmet.
Now I am the master.
Only a master of evil, Darth.
It wasn't going to work. Lucas considered Orson Welles for the voice role, but decided his voice was too immediately recognizable. Audiences would hear Welles, not Vader. James Earl Jones was cast instead, brought into a recording studio to deliver all of Vader's dialogue in a single session. Jones was paid $7,500. His agents had advised him the film would not be a success and told him to take the flat fee and walk away. He was not credited in the finished film, not in A New Hope, not in The Empire Strikes Back. The voice that became one of the most iconic in cinema history went uncredited until Return of the Jedi in 1983. 9. Alec Guinness negotiated the greatest deal in film history. Alec Guinness agreed to play Obi-Wan Kenobi on one condition: he would not do any publicity for the film. He considered the project beneath him, described the dialogue as rubbish on multiple occasions, and later wrote in his diary that he felt deep embarrassment about his involvement. His agent, however, was paying attention. Guinness negotiated 2.25 percentage points of the 1/5 gross royalties paid to George Lucas. In 1977, that figure amounted to approximately $3.3 million, more than he had earned from most of his other films combined. By the turn of the century, Guinness had earned an estimated £56 million from Star Wars, more than his next 40 films combined. The actor who called the dialogue gibberish, who asked Lucas to kill his character off so he wouldn't have to come back, who considered the whole enterprise an embarrassment, walked away with one of the greatest back-end deals in the history of motion pictures. 10. The early screening used World War II dogfight footage for space battles. In February 1977, 3 months before the film's release, Lucas screened an early cut for Fox executives, filmmaker friends including Brian De Palma and Steven Spielberg, and the Marvel Comics team preparing the Star Wars comic adaptation. The effects were not finished, not even close. Almost everyone in the room was confused or unimpressed. Several directors reportedly didn't know what they were watching. Spielberg was the only person who left believing the film would be a success, and he attributed the room's reaction entirely to the missing effects rather than the film itself. 11. The Rebel base was a real Mayan temple in Guatemala. The Rebel Alliance's base on Yavin 4, the Jungle Moon, from which the X-Wings launched their final attack on the Death Star, needed to look alien, overgrown, and vast. Lucas found the location on a travel agency poster hanging on a wall while he was filming in England. He sent a second unit crew to Tikal, Guatemala, to film the exterior sequences in March 1977. The ancient Mayan temple complex, one of the most significant archaeological sites in the Western Hemisphere, became the Rebel base in the finished film. The pyramid visible in the wide establishing shots is real. The jungle surrounding it is real. No set was built. No digital enhancement was needed. The production simply flew to Guatemala, set up cameras, and filmed an ancient civilization's monuments as the launch pad for a fictional rebellion in a galaxy far away. 12. The film opened the same summer. Lucas was on holiday. By the time Star Wars opened on May 25, 1977, George Lucas was convinced it would fail. He had been hospitalized. He had watched the early screening with the confused directors and the World War II dogfight footage. He had been behind schedule, over budget, and under pressure from Fox for most of the production. He had delivered a film he wasn't sure about to a studio that wasn't sure about it either. He went on holiday to Hawaii with his friend Steven Spielberg rather than attend the premiere. His wife, Carrie, called him from the cinema to tell him the queues were going around the block. He turned on the news. The film had opened to $1.5 million on its first day across only 32 theaters. By the end of the summer, it had crossed $100 million domestically. Fox executives, who had been ready to cancel the whole project multiple times, were scrambling to renegotiate arrangements they had been happy to sign months before. 13. Chewbacca is made of bear, badger, lion, walrus, and seal Ben Burtt, the sound designer who created the entire sonic identity of Star Wars. Built Chewbacca's voice from recordings of 4 different bears, a badger, a lion, a seal, and a walrus, layered and mixed together into the specific combination that became recognizable worldwide. R2-D2's language came from Burt imitating baby noises, recording his voice through an intercom and mixing the results through a synthesizer. The sound of a TIE fighter was an elephant howl slowed down. Darth Vader's breathing was Burt breathing through the mask of a scuba regulator. An accident of experimentation that also inspired the creative decision to make Vader a burn victim. The sonic world of Star Wars was built almost entirely from animals, accidents, and the contents of an archive. 14. Luke's surname was changed from Starkiller. During production, the character at the center of Star Wars went through several names across the multiple screenplay drafts Lucas wrote between 1973 and 1976. In early drafts, the hero was Anakin Starkiller. Later, he became Luke Starkiller. The surname stayed with the character through significant portions of the production. In the early cut screened for Fox executives in February 1977, the opening crawl still carried different text from the version audiences eventually saw. The film was a moving target through almost its entire production life, with fundamental elements: names, titles, story structure, sound design, effects, still being locked in place weeks before release. 15. It saved Marvel Comics. Star Wars changed cinema. It also, almost incidentally, rescued an entire publishing company from financial collapse. Marvel Comics adapted the film across its first 6 issues, with the first issue hitting stands in April 1977, 2 months before the film opened. The comic was written by Roy Thomas and illustrated by Howard Chaykin. By the time the film released and the public appetite for all things Star Wars became clear, the comic was selling in extraordinary numbers. According to Marvel writer Jim Shooter, the Star Wars comic series single-handedly saved Marvel Comics at a moment when the company was facing serious financial difficulty. The licensing deal had been considered a minor piece of business. The impact was anything but. A director hospitalized by stress, a studio that gave away billions in merchandise rights without blinking, an opening crawl written by the man who made Scarface, and a film that the crew making it thought was ridiculous. Star Wars wasn't supposed to change everything. It did it anyway. Drop the fact that landed hardest in the comments below. And subscribe. The next story from behind the camera is already waiting.